Thank you all for being here this morning. We welcome you to the third and final session of this semester's Distinguished Speaker Series. And we're pleased again to have a very impressive and accomplished individual here with us this morning, Dr. Sue Ellspermann, who is the president of Ivy Tech Community College statewide. Upon the conclusion of Dr. Ellspermann's remarks, we will open the floor for a question and answer. For those of you who have questions, there's a microphone in each aisle to come down and ask questions following her presentation. Dr. Sue Ellspermann became Ivy Tech Community College's 9th president on July the 1st. She now leads the nation's single largest accredited statewide community system in the nation. Dr. Ellspermann has more than 30 years of experience in higher education, economic and workforce development, and public service. She most recently served as Indiana's 50th Lieutenant Governor from 2013 until March of this year. As the Vice Chair of the Indiana Career Council, she led efforts to align Indiana's education and workforce development system to meet the needs of employers, which is her continued focus at Ivy Tech. It was during her time as Lieutenant Governor that President Ellspermann made her first visit to Trine to review the work of our institution, to tour Innovation One and our engineering center, and to see what the economic development impact of our institution was on the region and the state. Her public service began in 2010 when she was elected as the state representative for District 74. Dr. Ellspermann formerly served as the founding director of the Center of Applied Research and Economic Development at the University of Southern Indiana, and also owned and operated Ellspermann and Associates Incorporated, an independent consulting firm licensed in the training and facilitation of simplex creative problem solving. Early in her career, she spent time with Frito-Lay and the Michelin Tire Corporation. She holds a PhD and an MS from the University of Louisville in industrial engineering and a BS from Purdue University, also in industrial engineering. Dr. Ellspermann is no stranger to Trine University, as she was integral in creating a new statewide reverse transfer agreement for students who have transferred to Trine prior to completing their associate degree at Ivy Tech. She also has been heavily engaged since July in the strategic planning process for the institution, inviting many sectors across our state to be engaged with them as they develop the future of serving our state and its students. We have also created partnerships and a presence on the Ivy Tech campuses in Columbus, Warsaw, Fort Wayne, Noblesville, and we continue our efforts to work side by side with them to better serve our state. We are grateful for our long-standing relationship with Ivy Tech and our friendship with Dr. Ellspermann, both in her role as Lieutenant Governor and now as President of Ivy Tech. She is married to James Mailing, a retired high school principal, and has a blended family of 4 daughters, 3 son-in-laws, 2 grandsons, and 2 granddaughters. It's my pleasure to welcome the President of Ivy Tech Community College, Dr. Sue Ellspermann.
Thank you, President Brooks. It is wonderful to be here this morning in Angola. You know, if you know me, I'm from Southern Indiana, from the little town of Ferdinand. It's as far south as you are north. We're almost to the Ohio River. But now with my time at Ivy Tech, we have 2 homes, that home in Indianapolis as well. So it was only half the drive this morning. But as President Brooks shared, Ivy Tech and this institution have a great tradition. I'm inspired by what Trine has done here in Angola and for the state of Indiana from the many times I've gotten to work with President Brooks. And the relationship we have at Ivy Tech is amazing, offering our students what's really the equivalent of a 3+1, almost 3 years, 89 credits they can receive at Ivy Tech at that very affordable rate, and then another little over a year with Trine to complete a wonderful high quality degree, which many in some of our areas would really struggle to do without the opportunities that Trine affords. And we are thrilled with that collaboration. We're thrilled with the opportunities ahead of us. We're so thrilled that my most recent hire to my cabinet is a Trine graduate. How do you like that? Isn't that good? Someday you'll need to bring him back, but his name is Matt Hawkins. He is my new CFO, and he is amazing. So it speaks to the quality of the students. How many are students right now? Raise your hand so I can see who's in the room. Okay, so I see quite a few of you back there. You won't know till you leave here just what a high quality education you've received and how it will prepare you for the future ahead. So I've said, I've named this talk Leadership in the New Millennium, and a little bit of why. Some of us have watched on the business front, in the nonprofit front, but certainly we've seen at the political front how expectations are changing in leadership, and we know when we see things that don't meet our expectations as well. And so I really wanted to frame this talk a little bit more about leadership and what we should be thinking of as it's particularly as students, as you will be leading these organizations in the new millennium, what to be thinking about. So let me ramble a little bit around that topic. I do think leadership is a learned behavior, and we get that, no doubt, as a product of our environment. So I begin with my first leadership learning environment. For me, it was in my dad's little jewelry store. So now I have an aunt in the room, Jan Baglin, and a cousin, Laura, sitting out there. So they know about this little jewelry store in Ferdinand, Indiana. My dad thought girls were better at selling jewelry than boys. So only the girls worked in the jewelry store. So two sisters, the three of us worked there. But it was how he ran that business that stood with me. And these are the timeless values. You treat every customer with respect. You know, we served a farming community, so most of the transactions were $5 or $10 each. They were not big ticket diamonds. Now, once every 5 or 10 years, one of those family members would get married, and it might be a bigger, but it was that treatment every day of how you take care of your customers and own your actions. And if you make a mistake, you make it right with the customer. The family business rested on the success, the integrity that were offered. But probably more important was how he raised us in that business. You know, we tracked, calculated, and took out our own pay. Dad never asked. He said that was our responsibility. We were taught to run the business, to order, to price, to do the bookkeeping. When they traveled to Europe, when I was a senior in high school, I ran the jewelry store while they were gone. He just said, don't give it away. Just don't give all that product away. I think he already had a deal with the local newspaper that I did the ads, I ran the sales, did whatever I want, but I think they knew that I couldn't do anything too bad. But I think what that said of his trust in me, but he understood that that was part of raising us up to empower us as his children. So, key leadership learnings. A good leader has impeccable integrity, values all customers, constituents, stakeholders, and is a role model to others. Very priceless. So, good example. So fast forward through college, I was a Purdue undergrad in engineering. I was a co-op student. I worked for for General Motors in Flint, Michigan from 1979 to 82. There I learned both best practices and some not so good practices. You know, General Motors has some of the smartest, well-trained professionals in the world. However, they were not empowered. Engineers were a very small cog in a very slow-moving wheel of an organization. Everywhere, there were reasons why you couldn't make change. There were layers of approvals, there were union rules, there were numerous disincentives to take initiative. And you can imagine how a young industrial engineer would feel that was frustrating. I wanted to make change, and yet it was very, very difficult to do. In fact, in the 80s and 90s, GM had the technology for the electric car and buried it. Today, things have changed tremendously. The current CEO, Mary Barra, wonderful woman. She is a breath of fresh air for the institution. She has embraced change. They are going to lead in this autonomous environment, and she has learned. The institution has learned. But as I saw in 1982, when I did not take my job offer from General Motors, to almost, at the time of the Great Recession, almost being bankrupt and having to come back. They're in a much better spot today. But what I learned from GM is that leaders must be in tune with their external environment. Things were changing, and you have to be able to change with the times around you, whether that be the practices of the Japanese in building better vehicles, or whether that was the electric vehicle, the technology's changing. You have to be able to change. So now fast forward to the place where I really grew up as a leader, and I would say that it was Frito-Lay in Dallas, Texas. At Frito-Lay, I learned entrepreneurialism. That means being entrepreneurial inside the organization. In fact, when they hired a young professional, if they did not gauge you to be promotable 2 levels within 5 years, you were let go. That was the talent they wanted. They wanted people who would take charge, move forward, and be seeing the opportunities for the organization. So that was good. However, I was hired at a time when the young people in the room won't remember this. Some of us who have been around longer will remember the 80s and double-digit inflation. Do you remember when inflation was 12 or 13%? A mortgage would be as much as 18%. And at Frito-Lay, they realized you could not just add a dime to a bag of potato chips every few months and think customers would continue to buy them. At some point, they would stop purchasing your product. So they understood they had to do something. And so they set this goal. This goal was to offset inflation. That meant we needed to turn the curve from going up to flatlining that curve, the effect of cost, offsetting inflation. It was a $500 million goal in a $2 billion a year business. $500 million. So we set a goal to do that in 5 years. We did it in 4.5, and we did it through the best practice that I will share. At Frito-Lay, we engaged every employee. It wasn't just the executive office. It was engaging all of our employees in process improvement, in finding change at the shop floor level, at the engineering level, at the sales level, at the warehouse level, and every level in between. And over that time, we were able to achieve this. But here was maybe the most exciting discovery. The discovery was that those plants who did the best job, the most methods improvement, the most improvement overall, also had the highest morale. So what we know is the more engaged people are in change at all levels, particularly those at the front lines, the more morale improves. So at Ivy Tech, this has really been the basic premise of what we are undertaking. We have much to change. I see Chancellor Geraldine Mosier here. Wonderful job she's doing, but even with that, we know there is so much we have to change. My goal is really to create the most agile community college in the nation. And we must be agile to provide the skilled workforce employers need. We must be agile to serve an ever more challenged student that walks in our door. 69% of our students are part-time, nearly 2/3 are Pell eligible. So they're a real challenge. As we know, as the Trine students know here, most of those who work in the workforce of today and tomorrow will require some post-secondary degree or credential. The day of low-skill work being available is not out there. They need a degree or credential. So as an example, this spring, we had a team of 18 from our Ivy Tech representing all of our regions and a true multifunctional team, all levels of the organization being represented, from faculty member to marketing to foundation to back office, Bursar, in creating the Ivy Tech that we are restructuring into. That team made the recommendations to restructure a 55-year-old organization, dissolving our 14 regions into 19 campuses. We call it lovingly putting more community in community college. We renamed Central Office to be Systems Office. As I was reminded from my Frito-Lay days, that at Central Office, we don't graduate any students. The real work is done on each campus, all 19 campuses. And so we are Systems Office. Our job is to serve the campuses. And that's a shift in our thinking. We help support accreditation, we help support all the programs, and we help our 19 campuses succeed. So a second leadership principle I learned from Frito-Lay was from one of our older plant managers. He was from Salisbury, North Carolina, a little sleepy community. And he also managed the oldest plant in Frito-Lay, the oldest one. It should have been shut down years ago. There had been many, many newer plants with much larger, much better technology, everything going for them. But that little Salisbury, North Carolina plant continued to do well. See, in Frito-Lay, whichever plant could produce the product the most reasonably got that product. There was a point in time when Frankfort, Indiana, was delivering product into Louisville, where Louisville had a plant because Frankfort could produce it more reasonably. Likewise, this little Salisbury, North Carolina plant just kept figuring out how to do things better and how to do it better. They were always able, even without the technology, their people did it. And so I asked the plant manager one day, how do you keep doing this? How do you come up with this? He said, because I always say yes. He said, even if the idea they're proposing is something I don't think could possibly work, I say yes. Because first, they typically are right, not me. They are those who own the job. They know it better than I do. I shouldn't second guess them. And secondly, he said, if it fails, we will all learn a lot and we'll never make that mistake again. And that principle is one that I am trying to embrace at Ivy Tech. My cabinet knows our job is to say yes. And we demonstrated that most recently here in Northeast Indiana. And Gerald's nodding. We had the proposal to start a baseball team. Who knows about the Ivy Tech Titans? Raise your hands, come on. If you don't, you should be buying t-shirts before you leave today, right, Gerald? Okay, so the proposal from the campus was that they wanted to start a baseball team. Now, we don't have any NJCAA, Junior College Athletic Association work. We're all intramural to this point. And when that came, it was very easy for me and all of my cabinet members to go, oh no, we don't want to go there. We don't want all those headaches that come with that. But Gerald and her team had done their homework. They did the really heavy lift to say this is right for our community. Remember putting more community in community college? And so they shared their plans. We said, we support it. Let's figure out how to make this work. And so we are underway. They are 12-0-1. I hear from Representative Morris that they can't compete formally this year, but they are undefeated. Let's keep that up. And it is to say that for them, the day they announced, they had 30 applications of young men wanting to apply not only for future transfer students, but a couple of them in HVAC. And they will be full-time students who will need to maintain good grades. And it's a great example of doing what's right for the community and the students. So we will see, we're big cheerleaders, but I expect everyone here to come to a Titan game this year, right? So you're invited. So leadership is bidirectional. My job is to empower the thousands of talented colleagues we have at Ivy Tech to better serve our students, our employers, and the community. No leader can do it themselves, and I'm sure President Brooks would say the same thing. I'm also a student of a CEO named Scott Davison, CEO of One America in Indianapolis, in which I'm privileged to serve on their board. He calls it EWA, Empowerment with Accountability. So it's not just empowerment, there has to be accountability to the results. Our new strategic plan, which we'll be unveiling in January, has measures in it. So there's enrollment goals, there's persistence goals, there's completion goals, there's placement, and even the wages our students make when they leave Ivy Tech will be part of those measures, as well as, of course, the financial measures, employee engagement, and community engagement, all to say we want to empower, but we have to be working towards key results. Our overarching vision is 50,000 degrees or completions a year, degrees, credentials a year from Ivy Tech. That's more than doubling the goal that we have today. And like that Frito-Lay BHAG goal of the offsetting inflation, getting to 50,000 degrees or credentials a year is what Indiana needs us to do. And trying to figure out how to get there will be a big creative lift. So let me then segue into what I think the real secret sauce is in leadership. It's building a culture of innovation and continuous improvement. My life's work is in the area of creative problem solving. You heard President Brooks mention Simplex. For 20 years, several within Frito-Lay, but 20 years on my own, I worked with companies across North America and beyond, Canada, Thailand, England, to do creative problem solving. And that was a way of engaging people to do not the kind of problem solving you learn in school, which are those problems that have a right answer. The fact is, most problems in the real world don't have a single right answer. If you haven't seen it yet, students, you will discover it the day you walk out the door. Like, what do I want to do for my living? Or how do I roll out a new product? Or how are we going to increase profits? Or whatever that is, most of those problems don't have a single right answer. And so creative problem solving was the process we used to help employees think through, first find good problems to work on, good opportunities, to define them, to then reach out and shape good solutions, and then implement in a consensus-driven way. It taught ideation, which is the ability to diverge, as well as evaluation, and maybe the most important skill was something we'll call deferral of judgment, the ability to withhold your judgment long enough to best understand what's good about, what's important about that fact, that problem, that idea, or that potential solution. Simplex was developed by Dr. Min Bassiter, my mentor and colleague for almost 30 years, saw it work from the biggest companies, including Microsoft, which was one of those I had as a client in my last years, to groups like the Sisters of St. Benedict, a women religious, 150 women in a monastery in southern Indiana, but many nonprofits and even government, because it helps you solve important problems. These skills, I believe, will be the most important. And at Ivy Tech, we have now trained over 100 of our key leadership in Simplex in the basic skills. We've trained over 50 facilitators. We're training trainers. And the goal is to have that thinking, that ability to bring a group together and deal with complex, messy issues that come up every day in an effective way. And that supports the goal of that most agile community college. And yes, we're augmenting it with lean management and all kinds of additional tools to take on the myriad of challenges we see. So I'm going to share a few lessons in leadership from the last 8 years that might be interesting as well, and then I'll open it up to questions. You know, the last 8 years have kind of been the journey of a lifetime in public service. I was an engineer, I was a consultant. I never planned on being in those roles that I held as a state rep and lieutenant governor. So I'm going to share with you just a few of those lessons I learned. First of all, elected leaders are public servants first, leaders second. And what do I mean by that? Though you do need to have an ego to run for elected office, because you have to have a confidence to be out there with people. But being elected is not about you. It is about the people you will serve. Party is not first. Getting elected is not first. Serving is first. Political parties today are really the tail wagging the dog. They're forcing thousands of points of view into two major buckets and making you think that other bucket is not so good. Good ideas transcend parties. So I'm going to share one story. my first introduction to when I thought political process could be good was way back in the 90s. I was asked to facilitate in Vanderburgh County, southern Indiana, that's Evansville's county. I was asked to facilitate a project for then County Commissioner Richard Murdoch and Sheriff Brad Ellsworth. Many know Richard Murdoch went on to run for Senate. Brad Ellsworth was a congressman. Two different parties. So Democrat and Republican co-leading a jail building project, right? We had jail overcrowding, as many areas do, but that's a very divisive issue in a community. It's very expensive to build a new jail, and Vanderburgh County had lawsuits against it, and it was a tough time. And so the county put together this blue ribbon committee and asked if I would facilitate it. By this time, I had been facilitating lots of things. We brought judges, prosecutors, chaplains, elected officials, all together in a team and worked through what to do about the jail, using Simplex in the open with media in the room over 18 months. We went through the facts, we identified the challenges, we solved many short-term ways to try to make the existing jail better and more efficient and working better for those who were there. But at the end of it, we realized we still needed to build a jail. That commission came together and not only reached consensus, but were unanimous. There was no drama with the building of the jail. It went forward as you would hope any good project would. And at the end of it, I said, government can really work, because this was an example of all those from all points of view coming together to do the right thing. And so it was because we had leadership that put themselves as public servants first. Second, leadership is doing the right thing even when it is hard. I'm a huge advocate of women in elected office. I believe having more women will improve the process that we see out there. We know women, research shows that women in office collaborate more, they will have more authors on a bill, and they work across the aisle more. We also don't view politics in the metaphor of war. We think it's about teaming up, we think about finding solutions, and we think of it as serving. As a candidate for office, my team had the 10 commandments of the campaign. No mudslinging was a number one tenet. That meant my own party walked away when they didn't think I could win. I told them, I'm the CEO of my campaign. We'll do it this way, or I'll walk away. You know, it is not about winning. It is about doing it right. And then if you do things right, as many of us know as parents, it's the way we raise our children. If you do things right, most of the time you will win. Not always. After my first term as state rep, I wrote a white paper for the Speaker of the House on the 10 things we could do to improve our legislative process. So that's all about doing the right things. Number 3, civility is a skill that is most lacking right now. You know, if you're in elected office, there's such a need to be respectful. And that incivility is so unbecoming. It kills teaming. We're seeing what's happening in DC right now. We hear it, we don't like it, we're even embarrassed to hear it. For many of us, we don't want our children to be watching those shows where we see it. So again, for me, that's a non-negotiable. It's one of the many reasons I'm very happy to be where I am right now, but it's also the one thing that as I left elected office, I told then Governor Pence, now Vice President Pence, political civility and women in office would be 2 things I would continue to promote even as I stepped away. And 4, finally, I'm going to just make mention that there still are some genuine glass ceilings to women and minorities in leadership. You know, though it is okay to have women in many leadership roles, the closer it gets to the top, the more there seems to be separate standards. For instance, people will ask, is she qualified enough? Now, research shows that women don't even apply for jobs until they are almost overqualified. That is true. I joke about men can wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and say, I'm going to run for president. Women generally think they ought to be qualified to do that. So anyway, that's just my personal preface. But people will ask, is she tough enough? Really? Who decides that? Or maybe is she too tough? Or maybe she's not likable enough. And when you think about the last 8 years and Hillary Clinton running, we know that got often a lot. That would not have been asked of a man. Minorities have it even harder, as they sometimes haven't been raised in the privileged families to understand country clubs, golf outings, business casual, all the many things that many others would know. CEO positions and for-profit boards are among the least populated by women, and of course, our nation's highest CEO office, that of governorships and presidencies. So, in closing, at 57, I realize I have been blessed to be around great leaders of all kinds, and I've been blessed to be mentored by many. Leadership in the new millennium will require even more integrity, servant leadership, empowerment with accountability, shared vision, and the development of a culture of innovation, continuous improvement, diversity, and inclusion. That said, leaders will need to remain adaptable and students of change. The world ahead will, no doubt, be rocky and exciting both. Thank you for letting me join you today, and I would love to entertain some of your questions. So this should be the fun part. What are your thoughts? Leadership or otherwise? Yes. That's right. I'm supposed to direct you to those mics, either to the left or the right.
Hello. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for being so well prepared and giving such a good speech. Nobody else wants to ask a question yet. I'll just go ahead and warm it up for everybody and break the ice a little bit. So could you peel back the curtain a little bit about how you judge the needs of industry to tailor what degrees you offer and how many people you push through different degrees? Like, how does that work on your side of the curtain?
It's a great question. So at Ivy Tech, we've done a lot of work on what we call workforce alignment. And so there is data out there on from BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, from ONET, from all kinds of data sources around what the needs are. Now, that's all forecast information, both short-term and long-term. So we take that and we look at it and we crosswalk it to our degrees and credentials to see how that fits. But then what we know, it's a forecast, right? And it doesn't pick up everything. So we count on the local program advisory boards in for each of our campuses to look at that data, at least regionally, and say, what should it be? Now, the bigger question is, once you know that, now what adjustments do we make? So we're going through at Ivy Tech what's called the 4-quadrant exercise. I smile at Geraldine because we have quadrant 1 is where there's high demand for jobs and we have too few students in those. Think about machining and welding and industrial maintenance. Lots of jobs, too few students in them. Our challenge becomes, how do we recruit more students at the high school level as well as adults? Then quadrant 2 is those where we have high demand, but we have every seat filled. And I will use the example of nursing for that. And in fact, here with Parkview's partnership, we are trying to expand that. But it's expensive and it's hard to do because there's limited clinical spots and not enough masters in nursing MSNs to hire to teach. So, but that becomes a challenge. In my words, that creative problem solving, how might we? That's a how might we increase those on campuses. Quadrant 3 is where we have too many students for the jobs that are out there, higher supply than demand. That's a tough one. And I use criminal justice because we have lots of students who come. Do I have criminal justice majors in the house? Raise your hands. There's a few. There you go. Okay, I'm just saying this. There are more of you majoring in it than there are direct jobs out there. So what we've asked to our counselors to say, can we talk to those students? We need some. We just don't need as many. How do we say, how about other related careers like cybersecurity? There are 10 times the jobs in cybersecurity that need to be filled and twice the pay. So can we do that? That's quadrant 3. Quadrant 4 would be where we're in equilibrium. So the challenge across Ivy Tech is that within the next couple of years, every campus will be aligned to those demands. Now, we know that will continue to change, so we'll never be 100% aligned to it, but we can look at it closely. We can be much closer than we are. One benefit we have as a community college is a vast majority of our students are going to stay in that community. So it's very important that we're helping the students know where the job opportunities are in their community, so it's a little more direct. Okay, he warmed them up, so now we're ready for that next question. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for coming. You are involved in something I'm involved in too, which is trying to attract women into STEMs. Tell me about it.
Well, I'll start by saying that being a woman in STEM, you'll like the story. My daughters had no option when they were in high school but to go through Purdue's Women in Engineering Day at Purdue. I took my oldest as a senior under duress. She did not want to go, and took my 8th grader at the same time. And I'll tell you the true story because this is part of the lesson here. My 8th grader sitting next to me was listening to a young woman speak about her exciting career in the CIA. She was an engineer, but she worked for the CIA. My 8th grader looked over at me, her eyes got as big as almonds, and she said, "Mom, if I'm an engineer, I could work for the CIA?" And I said, "Kara, engineering opens a lot of doors." And that's true. That's what STEM does, right? It opens a lot of doors, whether your PhD is in animal science or whether you're an engineer or whether you're in a tech field, it opens a lot of doors. And so what is important is that we expose girls early and often. That youngest daughter will defend her dissertation in biomedical engineering in November, this coming month. Very excited about that. The oldest daughter started in engineering, finished in neurobiology, not so bad. She's teaching chemistry in high school now, so that's good too. But it is making sure that girls have those opportunities. I serve as Indiana's honorary chair for Million Women Mentors, which is saying we have to bring more mentors around young women, particularly for them to see different opportunities. At Ivy Tech, we sponsor lots of robotics programs, and in fact, in the younger years, there is not any difference between the girls and the boys. There's somewhere in these middle school years that girls start hanging back and they don't want to be as involved, or they lose confidence in their math skills or other skills. We have to keep them engaged throughout because we know there's not a difference there. They can do it. They are as successful in those careers, and it's up to us to engage and Trine with the great programs you have here and the working with our schools. There's great opportunities, but there's always more that can and should be done there. But I think these things like the robotics. Hey, the other thing I will tell you, my favorite one with my girls is their high school in physics always made them do the Rube Goldberg thing, you know, with all the operations. And my daughter's named theirs Flower Power. It was as good as the guys in doing all the interesting stuff. The guys' stuff would do something like dunk a basketball down a toilet, right? That would have been their thing. Girls, it was more interesting. They wanted, it looked different. It just was nice, right? It's okay to be different. If I could change one thing, it would be all those textbooks that every example and every problem is based on building a bridge. If you're talking about forces, there are so many more interesting topics we could write problems on and use as examples that go beyond. I think that is one reason why biomedical engineering is the only field of engineering that is 50-50. And I think it's the combination of still, my daughter's a mechanical engineer, a master's and a bachelor's and PhD in biomedical, but the application to something she really cares about. And that's across all of engineering. There are things you really care about no matter what side, and the sciences. So we just have to invite young women in. Additional questions? Pause. Yes, President.
Can't let you off the hook that easy. So here's one where you wear your hat as both lieutenant governor and as president. We talked about this a little bit, but we've got folks from business and industry here today, and we hear a lot about the skills gap that we all face. Indiana's in great financial shape. We're a great business climate to draw industry into our state. how can we all do a better job working independently, collaboratively together, making sure we hear business and industry and serve those needs? I think you hit on something earlier. It's not all about those necessarily having academic credentials. Some of it's about training. We know years ago, and this is a nationwide problem, that a lot of the skills training and vocational stuff, is removed from the public school system where a lot of this ought to start. I don't know you have an answer to this, but is there thoughts you have on how we all work independently, collaboratively to address the needs of our state?
Well, I would give a big plug that if all four-year institutions worked as Trine does with others, it would be a big breath of fresh air, because we have to work together. We can't duplicate things across multiple organizations. We should try to be the leanest, strongest, making sure that students are getting getting credit for every credit that they've earned and can work seamlessly across our systems, because life happens and they may start with one of us and they may end with another one of us, so that's all important. But that is the work we did as a career council. As lieutenant governor, my first year in, Governor Pence and I had the General Assembly passed a bill that required the governor to chair the career council and for the lieutenant governor to be the vice chair. And that really was the $64,000 question. How do we align K-12, secondary, of course, and then higher education with workforce needs? And it really is complicated, and you can't just start with thinking, well, we'll get it right at kindergarten this year, and then in 20 years we'll have it right, because we don't have that kind of time. So it is, though, about how do we make sure that in our K-12 schools we're providing the kind of curriculum that really prepares. And that includes things like coding is like another language. We should be teaching coding in junior high or grade school, not waiting until someone picks it up later. Multiple languages earlier, lots of things that could, and of certainly project-based learning earlier. So those kinds of things. But then counseling is a big area. I know the Lilly Endowment, for some of those who are working with the schools, they've put about $30 million on the street for counseling. They're going to add another $10 million. Counseling, of helping students discover where they want to go. And it is discovering those meaningful paths out there, not just what do you want to be when you grow up, but what do you want to be aligned with what's out there, and having those thoughtful conversations about where the good jobs are and what those opportunities are. I was probably really blessed working in my dad's business because I worked around people all the time. But do you know that when I was in high school, I took drafting, the only girl to take drafting, and all the guys in my class were going to be engineers. No one ever suggested I ought to be an engineer. It was only after talking to all those guys that I went to my counselor and said, should I be thinking about being an engineer? And he literally said, no, girls don't do that, right? So you have those kind of outdated thinking. We need counselors who are very much in line with what the real needs are out there and how to best encourage all of our students, and the notion that post-secondary is going to be critical for virtually all. And so how do we help them into a pathway that's appropriate? In higher education, we have such an opportunity to better align ourselves. Indiana has a rich higher education environment with 2 Research Ones and Purdue and IU, with great state comprehensives, with amazing private colleges, and the nation's largest singly accredited community college in us. But we ought to be challenged to work seamlessly and efficiently and agilely together. And yet, one of those dirty little secrets is we often act too much on our own behalf and not enough on behalf of the entire state. So we have to do that, and I think that's something the General Assembly will continue to urge. There's a workforce report that will come out this month from the governor, authored by the governor's office, speaking to that, and I'm sure that there will be ever more. Now, the General Assembly has done good things in the areas of short-term credentials with their next-level jobs. Anybody who wants to go back, and there may be people in the room who want to go back for a high-wage, high-demand job that requires 2 years or less, the state will send you for free. They'll pay every bit of it right now, as long as you're not, they're looking for adult workers. So if you're 18, you don't qualify, but if you're an adult worker, and you want to go back, reskill, you don't have an associate degree or a bachelor's degree, you can do it for free and the state will pay for it. So those are, I think we're moving in good directions, but there's much more to do. And you, all in the communities, please expect that out of us. Please expect that out of your elected officials. Please expect that out of your school boards. Please expect it out of us as higher education, because we need to help in the most affordable and effective way get our workforce prepared to do the jobs that industry needs. And as you said, President, we are blessed in Indiana to have a strong economy, to have more jobs available for Hoosiers than ever before, and good jobs, so we want to move things up.
Any other questions? Time for one more. Dino?
You have an obviously incredible resume, and I'm always curious about what drives people, who inspires, what inspires you to do what you do and accomplish great successes in those things.
You know, I don't know. That's a good question, except that if you saw my Simplex creative problem-solving profile, I'm a generator, which means I love poor Jerry Lee, and I saw Alan Decker here. For poor them, I'm always finding opportunities, right? I don't find many bad problems. Problems are just, they're good to work on and move forward. And when you have an amazing team, like we have, you want to keep doing that. But it is about change. It's trying to make things better. The older you get, it's about making things better for others, for the world around. Having had 4 years to travel the state of Indiana and learn to love every one of the 92 counties and seeing what's special about every community, it really drives you to say, gosh, we have to do better. We have to serve all Hoosiers. We have to give that possibility for prosperity to every Hoosier, and we can do it. So that's kind of what drives me now. I don't know about other people. My husband kids me now. He says I can't hold down a job because I've had so many in the last 5 years. But anyway, it's been a great run.
Thank you. And Sue, we'd like to present you with a small token of our appreciation for taking the time to join us this morning. It's an early drive from Indianapolis, so we thank you for being here. But y'all, please join me in thanking Dr. Sue Ellspermann for being with us again this morning. And again, thanks to all of you for being here this morning and for attending our Distinguished Service Series throughout the fall. We ask you to continue to watch our website for upcoming events at www.trine.edu/FUR for both distinguished speaker and concert events coming up. So once again, thank you all for being here. Thank you again, Dr. Ellspermann, for being with us this morning. Thank you all.